Good afternoon. This is Mary Ellen Dahlman speaking to you from the Valdosta State University campus, and we thank you for returning for part 2 of the competency-based assessment conversation. Both Catherine and I referred to the last session as a debacle, so we have had a whole team on both ends, and we want to thank both teams, Libby especially on this end, and folks at DePaul for trying to resolve the technology so that this can actually be a conversation. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine. Catherine Marino.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And Russ Patterson is by my side, so if we have any problems at all, he'll be able to help us resolve them immediately. This session is focusing on competence-based learning and assessment, and I'm going to take 10 minutes to kind of frame some of the issues, help us get on the same page in terms of where the movement is headed, and then we will spend the rest of the time in conversation about questions, issues, ideas that you have for your own institutions and for the consortium, and then we'll weave in assessment aspects of this during the conversation. So, and as we're talking together today, I would really appreciate if you could keep track of questions, issues, agenda items that you might want to cover in June during the Adult Learning Institute. I will be there.
Catherine,
Yes.
Excuse the interruption. West Georgia, you've joined, but you have not muted your mic. Please mute your mic.
Okay.
Wait, Catherine.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So I'm just going to make a few overview points. And one is that competency-based learning and assessment surely is not new. There's at least a 40-year history. So there is a solid foundation to build on as if you are considering being a player in what's called the new movement. And having said that, there really is no one model or formula for competence-based learning, not in terms of defining it or how to deliver it or how to teach it. And so that may sound a little discouraging after all of this time, but actually I think it's quite promising because there are successful models to learn from, and there's numerous current innovations in the making that can help guide wherever you might want to go in this competence-based learning arena. And I think this recent explosion of interest and activity for competence-based learning really holds potential for significant changes in higher ed as an institution, and changes that are going to benefit our adult learners and our institutions that aim to serve them. So just a bit of context. Back in 1979, a colleague and I conducted a survey of adult baccalaureate programs in the United States, and we found 137 institutions that had adult degree programs. A few of those had competency-based, identified as having competency-based programs. Minnesota Metropolitan in Minnesota was one, School for New Learning here at DePaul, Empire State, University Without Walls. And then in 1981, there was a major book published called Competency-Based Education, and the contributing authors explored varying definitions of competence-based education, the different philosophies, different pedagogies, and issues in assessment. All of those have really carried forward into our current times. Just last year, 30-some years later, CALE, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, published its report on competence-based degree programs in the U.S. I don't know if this will pick up on the screen. This is available through the CALE website in their publications area. And in that report, 11 institutions were profiled, and they represented various models of competence-based learning. And Becky Klein-Collins, who was the author for this publication, struggled with how to categorize the wide array of approaches that she found, and she finally came up with 2 broad categories. One category that you're very familiar with is competency-based in the context of a course-based system, So the institution defines competencies that are expected of its graduates, and the students demonstrate those competencies by completing courses that relate to the competencies. So the umbrella framework there is the course-based system, and competencies are embedded within it. And almost all of those institutions include prior learning assessment as part of that model. And then the second major category that Becky identified was that competency frameworks that put student learning at the center, and that and demonstration of competence can be attained through any number of means. So it could be courses, could be independent study, professional certifications, and of course prior learning assessment from other modes of learning. So that one, competence-based, puts learning in the center, and courses are one vehicle that can be used to attain and demonstrate competencies. But in that model, the courses are inputs. They're not the outcomes per se. And while most institutions set their own competencies, some invite students to construct their own, which is some of what we do here at School for New Learning or at Empire State. One point I want you to keep in mind as we talk together is that competence-based learning can be done at any level. It can be done at the course level, department level, program level, institution level, and even consortium-wide. Part of our conversation, I think, will be centered around where are you most interested in, and where are you starting. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, in fall of 2012, two major foundations, Lumina and Bill and Melinda Gates, held a convening meeting to help set a national agenda for competency-based learning. And I was fortunate enough to attend that meeting, and there were 43 institutions represented, 2-year colleges, 4-year university, public, private. At that time, there were no for-profit representatives at the table. But it was very interesting to see the array of institutions that were represented. Some were early pioneers in competency-based learning, meaning they've been doing this for 3 to 4 decades. So Alverno College in Wisconsin, Empire State, School for New Learning. And then there are what I came to call current pioneers, those who've been doing it for 1 or 2 years. We have Kentucky Community and Technical College or Brandon University, where they're reframing their curriculum using the Lumina degree qualifications profile and LEAP. And then some institutions that have many, many years experience serving adult students that are just now turning to competence-based, such as University of Maryland, University College, and Sinclair Community College in Ohio, and Charter Oak State College in Connecticut. And there were the piloting programs, and the one you've probably heard the most about is Southern New Hampshire University, where they have developed a 3-year competency-based bachelor's program, and now they have an online competency-based associate's degree, self-paced. Students demonstrate mastery, unattached courses, and annual tuition of $2,500. So the curriculum where competence-based education is happening is at the associate's level, the bachelor's level, and master's level. We looked at master's degrees. It was quite a range. Most of them tend to be in business areas, and some are individualized. I want to talk a minute about some definitions, the terminology, because 40 years ago, people were struggling with terminology, and we still are today. However, in April 24th, actually, of this year, the U.S. Department of Education offered this definition. And they said, competency-based education is an outcomes-oriented approach. It is not dependent on seat time measures of learning. Instead, student achievement of learning outcomes is assessed and certified through observational methods. So task performance, exams, demonstrations, or other direct measures of proficiency. And credentials, whether it's credit or certificates, are awarded on successful demonstration of competence. So that's the U.S. Department of Education. And I think, as you know, Title IV is funding a number of piloting institutions that are doing direct assessments. I'll just give you an example of where the language differs, because it can cause some interesting cross conversations. At School for New Learning in DePaul, we use competence as our overall umbrella. We have 50 competence statements across 5 domains that represents our undergraduate degree. And then learning outcomes are articulated for any given learning activity, whether it's a course or independent study or some other form of learning. I think perhaps more common is that using learning outcomes as the umbrella and then specifying competencies as a subset. And I think that's what the Adult Learning Consortium is doing, is using learning outcomes as the umbrella with competencies as a subset. In 3 years ago, Johnstone, Ewell, and Paulson articulated a vision for a new system. And that was very similar to what was proposed back in the early 1980s. I think someone needs to go on mute.
Hello?
Okila, if you could go on mute, please, because we're not quite having our conversation yet. So the main features of competence-based learning are that the credits and certificates are structured in terms of outcomes and competencies rather than courses and seat time. That the awards are based on demonstrated achievement of competencies through assessment, so assessment plays an integral, central role. It recommended that there be early assessment so that gaps could be identified in terms of what a student's current abilities, and then that could determine the student's future learning experiences. Currently, that learning opportunities would extend far beyond formal coursework. And then also identified their prominent role of mentors for faculty to help shape students' learning. They advocated for third-party verification of attainment through professional associations or consortia and multiple forms of evidence for expressing student learning. Time, money, and access have always been the major issues for adult learners, I think, since the beginning of adult learner time. What's different today is that access is supported through technology, through distance learning, and we have systems-wide support that we have not had in the past. At the national level, we have Title IV financial aid possibilities that I mentioned. We have Lumina offering the degree qualification profile. There's some 200 institutions now are piloting that degree qualifications profile. There's a tremendous urgency around developing strategies to shorten time to complete the degree, to increase adults' employability, and to help bolster our state and national economy. So you know about Complete Degree America. You're involved in Complete Degree Georgia, and the Adult Learning Consortium is playing a key lead in Georgia's higher education completion plan. I want to pause with my overview comments for now and start the conversation by asking, what do you want to offer your adult students that your current system won't allow or doesn't support?
This is David at Bainbridge. You may be talking about this later, I don't know, but we're working on a competency-based certificate. But one of the remaining questions is financial aid and the whole course load issue for faculty. I mean, our whole system is designed around course loads rather than competencies, and how to manage their time and their assignment, all that is something we're still trying to figure out.
So you mentioned, say again the three, I think I heard 3 areas, David, 3 issues that are really on the table.
I think I said 2, but each of them have 8 embedded. The financial aid, how to ensure that students can do a competency-based system that's built on a course-based financial aid distribution system. And then the other issue is the faculty load, faculty course assignments, and how we can manage that with a competency system rather than a course-based system.
Are you at a point where you could submit a proposal to the federal financial aid under Title IV?
We could be very quickly. We're actually going to be doing this next year. And so we have a lot of questions left to be figured out. So yeah, we could.
I think, that is an opening that we've never had before. What I know, what many institutions are doing in the meantime is leading with a competence-based model and then assigning credit hours so that students can qualify for financial aid. I don't recommend that as a long-term solution, but that's in fact what we've been doing at School for New Learning for all these years, many years, is leading with competence and then attaching credit hours so that students can be eligible for financial aid. But I think yeah, go ahead.
With the competence system, they have some degree of self-regulation, right, in terms of when they do it?
They do.
So
they do, except that, as you know, the current constraints around financial aid are that students need to be registered for a certain number of credits any given quarter or semester. And it's problematic because it currently doesn't recognize prior learning assessment if it's not attached to credit. So I think we all need to be pushing toward submitting proposals for competence-based to get that recognized through financial aid. Are you offering the program, or you're in the phase, still in the planning phase?
We're still in the planning phase. We'll go live in January.
And is this multiple certificates or?
No, it's it's kind of an experiment with a single certificate in small business management that has, how many courses? Four or five courses plus the foundations. I think it's about 5 courses in the certificate. But it's we're going to attempt to make it self-paced as well as competency-based.
If you would like help talking that through, and the key leaders in that program are going to be at the Summer Institute, I would remind you that Catherine has made some time available to speak with campuses in Savannah.
That's fantastic. Can I have Wednesday and Thursday?
No.
Yes, Mary Ellen.
Catherine, this is Anthony Shep, Valdosta State.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? Have you had any experience, or let's say on the graduate level, I guess undergraduate too, but having kind of a hybrid where you may have some of the courses in a particular program provided in a competency-based approach, and other parts of the program would be more traditional credit?
Yes, actually the program that I'm coordinating now, our Master of Arts in Educating Adults, we're a hybrid. We have 7 required core courses that we offer in person. And then there are elective credits that students can use prior learning, or they can take courses elsewhere at DePaul, or they can do advanced level certifications. And then we also have what we call a applied inquiry project, which is a thesis project. And what I'm moving toward now is developing tracks or concentrations within that broad area of educating adults, and then those are going to be competence-based tracks. So the core courses will contribute to those competencies, But I want to have competencies that will help define what that track means, what that track represents. So we're actually in the planning stage for that part, but I think it's very, very doable.
What do you see as the greatest obstacle in that kind of approach?
A hybrid approach?
A hybrid approach.
I don't know that I see major obstacles. I think it's more educating the students to what is possible for them in a more of a competence-based approach. So one of the things we struggle with some is when we're offering courses, core courses, and this is a cohort-based program, so a group of students is together over time across the courses. So there is a greater opportunity to help them, what I kind of connect the dots from one area to the next. But even then, I think students have a tendency, the quarter ends, they check off, I finished this course, I'm going on to the next one. And it's very challenging to help them remember what they've learned and carry it into the next phase. So I think having competencies will help with that because, and I will have students do a modified learning plan at the beginning of their program. So they need to be, very conscious strategic about what they're doing for their electives and also how they're using each of the core courses to build toward that concentration.
Thank you.
And are you at the planning stage for graduate?
Very much so. We're at the planning stage.
Okay.
In fact, we look forward to talking to you at the coming ALC meeting with a little more structure we have at this very moment.
Yes. Okay.
This is Mary Ellen. I would encourage campuses to think, Catherine is now talking about a hybrid. She began, though, by talking about, if you will, deconstructing, my word, not Catherine's, a course-based model or a course-based program and deconstructing those courses into learning outcomes and competencies. But she's also offered us some models of starting from the competencies, or in this case, the outcomes, learning outcomes, and trying to build a program, a totally new program, if you will, constructing a new program. Where are our campuses, Southern Poly, for example, or North Georgia? Where are you when you think about why you're on this call, with us today? Are you deconstructing a current program or considering building a new program?
Well, speaking from Southern Poly, we're thinking about going in the competency-based direction. We already have two programs that deal with that anyway. Our technical communication program and our architecture program both have competency-based. If the students can prove their competency, can get credit and move up and move faster in the program. But we're looking at that for other areas, and particularly in computer and information technology is one of the areas where they're most interested.
And so in that case, Dawn, they would be deconstructing or getting to competencies from their current course equivalent model.
Yes.
Thank you.
But we're also looking at competency-based for some certificates and degrees that we do not currently have. So starting from scratch on those.
But we hope they would be stackable into a current either associate or baccalaureate program. Is that the plan?
Possibly, particularly with the certificates building toward that.
Very good.
So, Dawn, in the two programs that you have now, that in technical communication and architecture, are students basically demonstrating course equivalence so that they don't need to take a given course and they can, am I understanding correctly that it's a course-based program? That students can,
in the architecture program, it is not course-based. They can demonstrate competency and can essentially, without a course-based process, can move up to the second year of studio or whatever, depending on their competency. So it's not course-based. In the technical communication, it is course-based.
And how do you deal with the David's question about faculty responsibilities and faculty load?
In both cases, it's not included. The assessment of that in those two departments is not included as a part of faculty load. However, at the programs we're looking at, it would be included as part of faculty load. And because we're just now getting to where PLA, the portfolio assessment, has been going on in these two departments for years, and faculty's never included that in their load. But with portfolio assessment through our regular PLA program for all the other departments, it will be included.
So the faculty in these programs have been doing this on a overload basis. Is there any compensation for them?
No, there's not been any compensation. It's just been the way they structure it, their degree program, and the fact that it helps students that they have essentially volunteered for it. Now, I'm sure that will change when the rest of the university goes to some competency-based and this portfolio assessment, and other faculty start getting compensation for that. I'm sure that will change in those two departments as well.
Do you have a plan, may I ask, do you have a plan for how you're going to do the course load that you just mentioned? I mean, how are you going to equate,
David, I'm going to stop. That's so far in the weeds that I really want us to go back to, are we talking about credit? And I know it's important. We do have within the Adult Learning Consortium a compensation model for evaluation of portfolios. I think that you've made an important point that we need to talk about as we go in the direction of not necessarily thinking of it as portfolio assessment, that we need a financial model, but Bainbridge has been in this one from the get-go, and I would remind you it was the last agreement we could get to after Maury Fiddler and Catherine had beaten us up for, 2.5 years? At least, thank you, Catherine. So if we could come to Catherine's question, though, about program and curricular question of whether you're taking courses and getting to competencies, i.e. deconstructing the current program, or as Dawn said, thinking about, and as David said, thinking about a new certificate or degree program that's coming from the competency perspective and stacking or telescoping into degrees. Dalton is on the call. Where are you, Andy? Or are you with us?
We're still working on getting our PLA program in place and accepted, so this is a little bit farther down the road than where we're sitting at the moment, but it's interesting to watch.
I remember at the Winter Institute, you helped us understand how to take a biology course, tickle out the competencies that were taught in AP, anatomy and physiology, and get to the missing pieces to supplement, if you will, with a module to help pre-nursing and pre-healthcare people meet the Area D requirement. Does this click for you for that?
Yeah, I guess it does now that you put it in those terms, and I was actually going to ask you about that later, because what the students are doing is more or less a portfolio, but I don't want to call it a portfolio because I don't want to have them take the PLA 2000 class. But yeah, they are collecting their competencies from A&P and applying it to the 1108. And along the way, they're going to have to develop some new competencies because the courses don't overlap totally. So I guess we are doing this.
I think you are. It's a matter of, and this comes back to Catherine, the question of common vocabulary.
Right. Andy, does your PLA program, is it allowing for both course equivalence and competencies?
Well, our anatomy and physiology courses require a lot of competency in animal systems, body systems, how they work. But those courses aren't allowable in our Area D as a lab science course. We've got a general biology 2 course that covers probably about 80% of the same material. And so what we're trying to do is let the students take their A&P competencies and skills and apply them toward the biology 2 course where they can get credit and not have to retake courses.
Well, that's a great example of what Mary Ellen referred to as deconstructing courses, kind of slipping competencies in there.
So I guess we are doing it. I'll let you know when we have a student actually finish.
Okay.
I've got one working on it now, so we'll see. Hopefully this summer.
Is anyone else working on converting course-based into competencies?
Well, as I mentioned, we are about to begin the process, and we were going to begin, at least in my mind, with this developing competencies per course approach. I mean, getting the faculty together who teach the courses in the certificate and, you know, taking their current learning outcomes and trying to organize them into broader competencies. That was my approach. I don't know any other way of doing it. That's what I planned on doing.
Makes sense. I mean, I think it's a very logical way to proceed. I had an experience recently working with a small private school in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, and they're very open, very interested in developing competence-based models, and are extremely wedded to the course-based system, influenced also by the British education system. And as a colleague and I worked with the faculty over about 2 to 3 days, we started at the course level and helped them pull out, as you were saying, David, what are the competencies that are represented in the given courses, and then how might they shift their teaching strategies and their assignments to accommodate, to be more in alignment with competencies. But what happened there was, after the first day, people began to talk more in terms of program level competencies, which they hadn't been thinking about before. And it sounds so that we had, you know, 2 groups working at the course level and the program level. And are you talking also, David, about program level competencies? Or is that the level you're talking about?
Not at this point. We just want to kind of experiment with this manageable certificate first, and then see how it goes.
I mean, certificate to me is also it's a certificate program. So not degree program yet.
Yes, I guess in that extent, yeah, we are saying for this certificate or this program, these are the competencies, right?
And then the courses will be designed to help satisfy those competencies.
Right.
And in your model, is there room for prior learning assessment?
Yeah, because I mean it's competency assessment, so if you can
Okay.
demonstrate competency, absolutely.
I mean, I know it sounds like an obvious point, but that's not always the case with some institutions.
I mean that's the plan. That will be a first for us to do it this way, but that's why we're doing it. We're going to try to pull out all the stops on this little 5-course certificate and see what happens. Triage it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really smart strategy. A number of places I know kind of get stalled in working toward the competency-based model because they say, well, we can't do it at a program level, or the institution isn't going that way. But to start wherever you can start, certificate program, reconstructing a major, I think anywhere, start somewhere, and I think you need to get some experience, and hopefully that your success with the certificate program will bring you into another initiative.
We will see. Ask me this time next year.
Questions about assessment?
Catherine, it's Mary Ellen. You have on the screen behind you, and I think we've talked a bit about beyond coursework, how do we get to competencies, but I also see faculty as mentors, and above that, your bold assessment, early diagnosis. We've often had discussions with faculty and among faculty, the conflict as some of us see it, between being a mentor and then ultimately being the assessor. And how to resolve that being a conflict or not being a conflict of interest when we mentor and we model and then come back and assess.
Yeah, I think that's an important issue to address, and I see institutions approaching it in different ways. Some have detached the mentoring from assessment, so that assessment the mentor is not involved in the formal assessment. There's a pool of assessors, or the assessment is farmed out to some other body. In the School for New Learning, where I am as a mentor, I do assess students' work, and then there's always a second assessor who has expertise in that particular area. So I'm really kind of the first line assessor, and then it goes to the second person who has final say. Yeah.
I just thought of another issue in all of this. Is it common to take a mastery approach to competency assessment in the traditional curricular sense, that you must master this competency, or are we grading on competency? I got this, I got a C on this competency and I get to move on, or no, I have to demonstrate a certain proficiency. Where are we on that?
That's an age-old issue. In the system where I am, the School for New Learning started with narrative assessments only. We didn't assign grades. And that lasted for about 3 years. And then we were pushed by employers, when more employers had tuition reimbursement, and also students who wanted to have that sort of external validation of a grade. So we went to a pass, no pass basis, and then eventually we went to students having the option of a pass or letter grade. Pass being trying to set competence at, let's say, someone would have to achieve at least a C level, letter grade level to demonstrate the competence. What we found is that most students seek letter grades, which to me is, personally, I think it's unfortunate, because we're trying to help students demonstrate what they know and can do at a base level, and then be able to build on and move on to the next area. At the same time, grades are still an important part of the currency. In our graduate programs, we are forced to use letter grades by university policy that says graduate level work needs to have letter grades. What's your thinking on that?
I haven't given any thought to the actual grade part in terms of the record, but in terms of the competency, if someone achieves a competency, you are in effect saying they have achieved that competency.
Right.
C on the competency means somebody has actually achieved it or not. I mean, it does seem that there needs to be a threshold if we're defining these things as competencies.
I would agree, and I think there's a real tension there when we're talking about competence and we've set that base level for achieving it, and then students are still striving for that letter grade. It has a number of implications. I think one is that the competent level, if it's C level, is seen as that's not a desirable achievement. So the bar keeps being set higher for what it means, what it would involve to achieve a competence. And in our system, students can continue to work on a paper or a project or a demonstration until they achieve the level that they want. If it's beyond the baseline, which in some ways is great for learning, but it puts a strain on faculty resources. If I have a student who's submitting work 2, 3, 4 times over to get to what I might judge as being A level.
I would also say that there are some competencies where we need mastery. Drive red. You want them to stop 100% of the time, not 70% of the time when they see a red octagonal sign. And if it's someone drawing my blood, I would like them to get my vein more than 70% of the time. So, David, I would say you are right in examining the outcomes, the competencies, and it is totally appropriate to have the faculty determine that some things must be mastery. But if a C or better is acceptable in coursework, then a C or better should be an acceptable level in the current C of learning outcomes and competencies as well. So I don't think you have to paint it, or I'll defer to Catherine, but our discussion, you don't have to have an all or nothing, but there are certainly some competencies where mastery is appropriate.
Except there is implicit in a competency approach this idea that when I've checked off a competency for someone, I'm saying they have achieved that competency. And it just...
There will be qualitative differences. There will be differences in how you have to jump the 5-foot barrier. Well, some people will jump at 5'8", some will jump at 5'3", and some will clear the bar at 5 feet.
So the 5'8" is a C, 6 feet is a B, and 6'3" is an A.
That's your faculty's determination.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Dawn, and one of the big difficulties we've had with PLA is having to continually remind faculty that, in fact, if they're doing portfolio assessment, the person doesn't have to pass it with an A, but instead a C or D. And while faculty are really comfortable with the letter grades in regular courses, it's been a constant reminder for for portfolio assessment, and so we see that as an issue with competency based and how we're going to handle that, because there are some things that you do have to do, 99.5%.
And I think with any competence-based program, what this issue really needs to be agreement among the faculty. What are the minimum standards that a student could achieve to obtain the competence, and then are there certain competencies that, as Mary Ellen said, needs to be 100% or 90%? So the definition of competence is there's not a set formula. It depends on the subject matter, it depends on the technical skills that are associated with the competence. You can have different levels even within a given program. Is that part of what you were saying, Mary Ellen?
Yes, it is.
So let me ask you a real quick question. When we're saying competency, we need not confuse it then with mastery. I read back and forth that term. We're talking about mastery level or competency level. Mastery would imply potentially a much higher threshold than competency would be a more relative term that can be defined locally.
I think that's reasonable. I've seen, I would say set your own working definitions and stick by them, because in the literature, sometimes, as you pointed out, Anthony, sometimes they're using the term mastery when I think they're talking about competence. But I think there are areas where you would want to say that for this set of knowledge or these skills, we are expecting mastery level. I'm thinking about the graduate program that I coordinate, where the thesis is intended to be a culmination of what the students have learned through the core courses and how they're applying that to their own particular problems in their own workplace setting. And we expect a level of familiarity with the literature and being able to connect the practice with the theories, certainly a higher level at that end stage than we do as they're going through the building blocks of the courses themselves.
Catherine, this is John at University of West Georgia. Speaking of graduate work, have there been any issues that you've seen with prior learning assessment credit being a problem when a student applies for graduate work, if they apply for graduate work?
Yeah, if they're beyond, let's say, beyond a master's degree?
Well, just beyond the bachelor's degree.
Beyond the bachelor's degree. No. Very seldom does a student encounter any difficulties with that. It's sometimes, especially now when there have been so many programs and institutions that are using some form of competence or narrative assessments, sometimes the student needs to do a bit more explaining, or the students will come to the program and ask that we provide further explanation for a graduate program. But I can't remember an instance where any of the students that we've worked with at School for New Learning have been turned away, and they're getting into law school and medical school and professional graduate programs, MBA programs.
Catherine, it's going to be transcripted just like a regular course, right? I mean, they're going to get course credit for competence.
Right. I'm sorry, you got cut off.
I said, so how would another institution even know how the course was achieved?
Well, some institutions transcript by just saying this is portfolio assessment or prior learning assessment, and then a credit hour or a waiver. Sometimes, it could also be recorded as a course waiver. So it depends on how the institution is transcripting. My view is raise as few red flags as possible.
I haven't gotten that far with it yet, but my assumption is that we're not going to transcribe it any differently than we do the courses now.
Good. Good.
Delivery would be different.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Kathy or Mary Ellen. This is Richard Baskin and Tanya Moore at Gordon State College, and it goes back to the competency issue. Right now, you said something about determining what that means on a local level, and that's pretty much what we do now with standard type courses. However, we also have kind of a norming process that has to do with those kinds of courses, typically anyway, being offered. They're the courses we took, they're the courses we've been teaching, and they're common type courses, across the country and across institutions. So we have that kind of process that many times informally goes into determining what competency is as part of that, even though there may be some differences from faculty member to faculty member or institution to institution. But we do have that kind of process. So when we're talking about PLA, I know that our folks are trained. Do we have confidence, or have there been many issues with what competency means being an issue for various institutions and credit and transfer? Can y'all speak to that? Is that question clear enough?
Are you asking about the transferability or the consistency of assessments?
Yes, consistency of assessments and having confidence from institution to institution that that some sort of standard's been met. Has that been much of an issue, Mary Ellen, within Georgia, for example, or has it been Kathy national?
Richard, it's no more a problem than it is having common core courses accepted from one institution to another. As Gordon is historically an access institution, and I know that some of the bigger dogs in the fight, how was that for innocuous, don't college algebra from anyone but where the dog barks. So, UGA won't accept your course anyway. So I think that we have the same I'd like to think that we have the same ease of transfer through standardized testing methods, advanced placement, CLEP, we've talked about as PLA, and we would have that same trust that when a faculty member at Gordon State taught the Common Core course, the student would come to Middle Georgia and have the course accepted as it would for a portfolio assessment. But I think if you think about what Catherine said, which is she's the mentor and the first assessor, and then someone else reviews the documentation and the assessment process to say, yes, the course competencies were met if you're using a course match model, or the learning outcomes were met and there's evidence. So it's not a single determination, but a validation of an assessment. Then I would think that we would treat it the way any other assessment if it's an independent study. I don't say to Dr. Martinez, no, I don't trust that you've done that independent study correctly. Show me all the work. He transcripted it. He recommended the courses approved for credit. We accept it going forward. Because there is a rigorous process. It is learning outcome based. All of the documentation that the student produces is archived. There are signature forms that go to the program head the way you would an independent study. So we've not had it. While it's not widespread, no one ever questions the AP or CLEP, which are our most fundamental, or DSSD, our most fundamental forms of prior learning assessment. So
I'm wondering whether there's a parallel here also with courses that are transcripted for military. Because, for example, we had a gentleman recently try and was successful in getting credit for a project management class that we teach at the undergraduate level by demonstrating the project management training and assessments that he received in the military. And also, I think that was transcripted through ACE as well in their examination of his credentials and his work, for them to say this seems to be equivalent to a program management course, which then we crosswalked with our course objectives and learning outcomes to look at the degree to which we felt there was a parallel and a match. And based on that, we were able to say, okay, and award the credit. But I think the reliability of the assessments that are being used is a very important issue, and for all of us to be in a system to where we feel confident that we can accept those assessments indeed has to be done through a reliable process that we can all buy in.
And so the ACE credit review process is one that we've been looking at over and over again. And I don't, help me, Richard, is Gordon a SOC institution? Service Members Opportunity Colleges?
Yes, we are.
Like your SOC agreement, if I may, your SOC agreement says you must accept the ACE military credit recommendation. And 27 USG institutions, not 31, but 27 have agreed and are SOC members. So from the student viewpoint, we have a legal obligation by virtue of our SOC agreement that we must accept. Transferability is part and parcel of those agreements. So the more we do this, I think the more comfortable we'll be doing it.
And Mary Ellen, could I jump on your bandwagon for just a minute? And I think that you can actually make an argument that carefully constructed competencies that are evaluated very deliberately and then translate into a course credit are actually, in many cases, more legitimate than a traditional course credit, for which assessment, may be nothing more than a midterm and a final that haven't been really well crafted towards specific competency. So I think we can easily make the argument of, no, this is not just as good as, this is better, maybe even than traditional course comparisons. Can I get an amen?
Amen. I would say that you can certainly make the argument. And it brings to the point some really, to bear some very obvious aspects of competence-based assessment that might bear repeating. And it's what you said, David, about the clarity of the outcomes and the criteria. They need to be specific. They need to be transparent, so that the student and the assessor and the credit institution is aware of that there needs to be clearly documented, evidence of learning. So all of that is basically a given when you're doing, a competence assessment with integrity. I think we still face the issue that Richard raised, which is if this seems like something new in our institution, then it's going to get some scrutiny, and we need to be confident in our processes and our criteria and be willing to be able to articulate those and defend them if we need to. But I agree with Mary Ellen. There's probably more evidence of student learning in a course match or greater, competence approach than we often see in our own course, our own courses, our own classrooms. And we do have standards to draw on now that didn't exist many years ago. So the Kale's assessing learning has a set of questions and guidelines for at the local level to be able to talk through and reach agreements on. We do have ACE, we have CLEP. Kale is, I think you may be familiar with their learningcounts.org, is, I think, an important venture in that they are, training assessors, and whether an institution uses learningcounts.org or not is not really the issue. It's the intentional and rigorous training of assessors that's important. And Kale is also now moving toward including a competence-based approach as a companion to the course match. So I think we can. We don't have to make. It doesn't have to be an either-or choice. We can have hybrids. We can have some of our programs that are purely competence-based. Others are hybrids. Some are more on a course match model. If we really keep moving toward the articulation of criteria and standards for assessment, then we can only help our students. Mary Ellen, are we out of time?
We are out of time. Thank you, Catherine. As I said at the beginning of this session, Catherine has graciously made herself available by appointment, I would say, at the Summer Institute to talk with campus representatives if you are going to be a part of your campus team and would like to make an appointment to meet with Catherine. Why don't you use me as the conduit for that? Though you have Catherine's email directly, you're certainly welcome to work with Catherine. Now, Catherine, I would warn you, you need to hold off specific days and times until I get a final program to you.
Okay.
Because I have you committed.
Okay. And again, I would really appreciate whether you want to meet with me or not to hear more of your questions, your plans, so that I think I'm doing a session on Thursday morning, Mary Ellen, at the conference.
At this moment in time, it is Thursday
At this
morning,
moment in time, I'm doing, sometime during the conference, I'm doing a session. Any comments or that you can send me ahead of time would be very helpful in preparing for that structured time. And then I do look forward to being able to talk with individual teams throughout the conference.
Very good. Any other last questions for Catherine? If not, thank you all for joining us. This session has been video archived, and we will be posting this session on the Adult Learning Consortium iTunes U site. We will send each of the participating campuses an announcement when it's made its way from the archival system here at Valdosta State up to USG to be posted. So if you fell asleep at any point, we can have you rewatch that port. And you'll get your test in the mail. No, you won't. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
We've been on the edge of our seats here.
Have you? Thank you, Dave. Yeah. Leaned in, you were, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Bye. Thanks everybody.